Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Meg Bouffier. Welcome to Ask the Grant Writing Expert. You know me as the creator of your library of NIH grant submission courses. I have over 30 years of experience at NIH as a grantee, an intramural researcher, a staff writer, and now as a full-time NIH grant mentor. And I've helped clients land over $500 million in federal funding. So I'm here to answer your NIH grant writing questions. So fire away. Let's grab a cup of coffee and get started. So just a reminder that if you are watching this live, that you are in listen-only mode. You can type your questions in the Q&A box. You can go ahead and start doing that now. Just load up the Q&A box with your questions. I see that we already have one in there. If you have any comment to add to the discussion, feel free to put that in the chat box. If you're watching this as a recording on our YouTube channel, just a reminder that things move very quickly at NIH. So we are recording this on March 8th, 2023. So everything that I say today, I believe it is true as of today, but you should definitely check, always check with NIH to make sure that your information is most up to date. So changes to look out for, what you should be viewing in the library right now. I would say that you probably want to be, if you're applying for the June deadline, you probably want to be thinking about Master the R series or Master the K series part 1, which is the preparation part. And just to give you guys a little sneak peek at some of the updates that are coming up. At the end of this month, we will be launching our new learning management system. So we will be hosting our courses in a much more robust platform that has a lot more interactivity and is much more intuitive, has more features for users, the ability to look at more granular usage metrics. So we're really excited about launching that at the end of the month. And we will also be launching a rebrand. So the company name is going to change slightly. It's really to reflect the fact that I don't do medical writing anymore. I do grant writing. So I began this company 16 years ago as a medical writing company, and it has evolved into an exclusively a grant writing company. So the name is going to change slightly. It will still have the name Bouffier on it. But it will reflect what we currently do. So let's move on to the tutorial. So today we do have a tutorial that was based on the last question that we got last time. And I see a couple of questions coming into the Q&A. Feel free to keep sharing those because as soon as I finish the tutorial, we are going to cover those. So let's see. Okay, so you guys should be seeing an ESI FOA comparison chart that has a Katz ESI, the NIH Directors Award, and the Early Independence Award. So the question that came in last time, and I hope the person is on the call today, was about, like I'm an ESI and I'm having trouble deciding between the Katz and the R01 with the ESI advantage. And my answer was, well, hell, let's throw in the other two as well, the DP2 and the DP5, and then we can have a discussion about all of those. So this is a chart that I created a while back. It is still accurate, I believe, and we'll be putting, I hope in the chat box, we'll be putting information about how to access that information. Let me see if it's in there. Yep. So if you look in the chat box, my teammate Jamie has put a URL. If you go to that URL, you'll be able to enter a little bit of information and download this, this table. So first, what is an ESI? An early stage investigator at NIH is somebody who is 10 years or less from their terminal degree or their terminal training. So if you're a clinician of any kind, whenever that that time of 100% clinical training ended, that's when the ESI clock starts. So it's 10 years or less from whatever that is, and you have not yet been a PI on an R01 or equivalent, some sort of juicy R-level grant. It confers a funding advantage at the R01 level. So R21 and R03 have nothing to do with ESI. Landing one doesn't eliminate your ESI status, nor do you get a funding advantage for being ESI at those mechanisms. And one question that I got during the week dovetails nicely with this is, what's the difference between an ESI and an NI? So an early stage investigator is what I've just described, 10 years or less from your terminal degree, have not yet been a PI on a major NIH award. A new investigator is somebody who is more than 10 years from their terminal degree. However, they have not yet been a PI on a major NIH award. There's a small funding advantage for an NI. Okay, so for those of you who are ESIs out there, you have a variety of options to choose from in terms of your funding mechanisms. So, and these all say FOA, like you'll see FOA here. NIH just changed that to NOFO, just so you know, instead of funding opportunity announcement, it's notice of funding opportunity. It literally happened this week. So you're going to see me changing all these documents to say NOFO instead of FOA, just to keep things exciting and keep everybody on their feet, add a few more acronyms to the mix. So probably a lot of you have heard people talk about the Katz ESI R01. So the Katz is kind of like an R21 in that it's meant for a researcher who's moving in a brand new direction where they really don't have, I mean, you're literally not allowed to report any preliminary data on the Katz R01. However, the Katz is specifically for people who are ESI. So the whole idea behind this was an FOA that was developed a couple of years ago. It was really meant for somebody who was early in their career who had gotten some kind of really exciting finding and they wanted to move in a new direction and they didn't have data for it. So that's what the Katz is meant to be. There's no limit to the budget. It's 5 years like a traditional R01. You can have a multi-PI plan, but both PIs have to be ESIs. There are 3 deadlines. They're a little bit before the R01 deadline. You are not allowed to report preliminary data. In theory, you're not allowed to have preliminary data, but in reality, that we'll talk about that in a moment. That's not really the case. So it's important that you describe a project that is not just an incremental advance over a previous project. You have to show that this is an entirely new direction. And in fact, there's this one-page attachment called New Research Direction that each of the PIs has to fill out, describing how this is a new direction. What constitutes a new direction is murky at best. So I have had many applicants who have had conversations with a program officer about whether or not what they're proposing constitutes a new direction. And the program officer says, yeah, I think that definitely constitutes a new direction. And then the reviewers completely disagree. So it is very hard for me to wrap my head around how reviewers are going to view this new direction issue. And part of the problem may be that these are grouped within a given study section. So it's not as if all the Katz applications are reviewed at a single study section. This is not what happens. There are dozens, hundreds of standing study sections at the Center for Scientific Review. And in any given one of those, the Katz submissions that are relevant to that topic are grouped and reviewed there, which is probably why we're seeing so much inconsistency in the way that they are reviewed. The funding lines on these are actually on all 3 of these, the funding lines are extraordinarily competitive. They are all very competitive. So the Katz is IC specific. So this is something that is funded from a given institute. It is reviewed at a study section that you choose from the hundreds of study sections available at the Center for Scientific Review. The reviews are highly inconsistent, and they're incredibly difficult to land. What I find in general that most people do is that they will write a Katz application, even if they have a little bit of preliminary data, and they won't report that preliminary data. And while they wait for the answer on the Katz, they build up their preliminary data and potentially get 1 or 2 publications and then submit it as an R01 if and when the Katz is not submitted, although you can resubmit the Katz. So, okay, so that's the Katz. And keep in mind that these are 3 FOAs that are specific to ESIs, but overarching this is that you always have the option to put in a garden variety R01 with the ESI funding advantage. So, and we'll talk about that at the end. So now let's look at the DP2 and the DP5. I'll speak briefly about these. So NIH is often criticized for funding next logical steps research. There are 4 funding mechanisms that fund things that are truly high risk, high reward, and they're broken down by career stage. So 2 of them are for early career stages, the DP2 and the DP5. These 4 high risk, high reward mechanisms are funded by the Common Fund. That's out of the Office of the Director. It doesn't come out of the budget of any given institute. So there's one mechanism, not participating ICs. So the difference between these is that the DP5 is for people who are bypassing their postdoc training. So this is for people who are really early on. And in fact, you must not be in a non-independent research position, and you have to have finished your doctoral degree or clinical training. This is obviously a little bit outdated, but within the last couple of years is basically the take-home message. The DP2 is slightly later. It's for exceptionally creative early career scientists proposing innovative high impact projects. So you can actually be in your first faculty position when applying for the DP2. Their budgets are somewhat similar. They're both 5 years. This one is a little bit higher, 1.5 million as opposed to 1.25 million. Both of these, you can't do a multi-PI plan. It just has to be you as the ESI investigator. For the DP2, you have to have a minimum of 25% effort. They both have a single submission date per year, so you really have to plan ahead on these. It doesn't have the traditional 3 deadlines in the course of a year. As far as preliminary data go, the DP2, it's not required, but if you want to include some, they'll evaluate it on it, and very similar for the DP5. So creativity and innovation are emphasized in both of these. They're both really meant to be high risk, high reward projects, things that are like paradigm shifting, really kind of outside the box, innovative things for the DP2 and the DP5, as opposed to the Katz, where it's simply a new direction and you don't yet have preliminary data. So there are no resubmissions on the DP5. You can do a second new submission in the DP2. The format on the DP2 is a little funky. It's a 10-page narrative essay. So for these, boy, I really encourage people to see if they can go to their pre-award support office and get their hands on a copy of a couple of these. So you can see what these essay type applications look like. They're very different than other types of NIH applications, whereas the DP5 is a more traditional 12-page research strategy. For the DP2, there's no cap on the submissions from a given institution, but for the DP5, you can only have 2 from any given institution on any given cycle. And remember, there's only 1 submission a year. So usually a university or medical center, it's a competitive thing to see who those 2 people are going to be who can submit. The reviews are a little funky here too. So for the DP5, they're all reviewed at a single special emphasis panel, which is kind of nice because it creates a lot more consistency among the reviews. And then the DP2 has this funky 2-phase system. They're all reviewed together as a batch, which again creates more consistency, but there's like a mail-in level of reviewer, and then it goes on to a second group of reviewers. It's a little bit funky the way that happens. So, all right, so the take-home messages here are the Katz is for a new direction where you, at least in theory, have no preliminary data. The DP5 is for people who are bypassing postdoctoral training and are not yet in their faculty position. The DP2 is for ESIs who may be a little further along and in a faculty position. Both the DP2 and the DP5 are for high risk, high reward, really outside the box paradigm shifting projects. All three of these have very competitive, like extremely competitive funding lines. How they all compare to the garden variety R01 with the ESI funding advantage, that's probably where your best funding lines will be, is the ESI funding advantage. So the ESI funding advantage tends to be about 5 percentage points over the typical R01 funding line at any given institute. Some of them won't report what the funding advantage is, but it usually tends to be up about 5 percentage points. So for example, if an institute has, let's say they're funding their R01s up to 11%, they'll fund their ESIs up to 16%. So that kind of gives you an idea of how these stack up against one another. And a very typical scenario is that I'll have an applicant who applies to one of these, and as they're waiting for the answer, they're building up their preliminary data and publications to put in the same project as a more competitive garden variety R01 with the ESI funding advantage, if and when they get a no on one of these three. So I hope that answers my person's question from last time about the difference between these. So I'm going to stop my screen share and come on over to the Q&As. And I also had another a mail-in question too, which I hope we'll get to after the live questions. Okay, so how often do R01 grants that go undiscussed or triaged the first round ever get funded with a resubmission? How many chances do you have for the same idea with revisions at the R01 level? That's a great question. So the extramural research division has actually put out statistics on the odds of funding after an application has been triaged or not discussed. So for those who don't know, if an application is not discussed or triaged, it means that it's in the bottom half of the applications and that its journey through the review process ended after the 3 assigned reviewers read it, scored it, and uploaded their scores to a portal. It never made it to discussion at the study section meeting. So that's called not discussed or triaged. So you can, if an A0 is triaged, you can resubmit it as an A1. And this person's question is, what are the odds that it's going to get funded? So I don't have those statistics at my fingertips, but I do cite them, including a graph that the Division of Extramural Research created on the odds of them being funded after a triaged A0. And they're not, the odds are not high. I'm not going to lie to you. If an application is triaged the first time around, the odds of it being funded as an A1 are not great. But having said that, I think that in recent years, I have seen scores bounce around all over the place. And I'm going to guess that any experienced NIH applicants on this call are probably nodding their heads right now, because it is not at all uncommon to see, for example, an A0 scores 16%. You resubmit it and diligently address all of the reviewers concerned, and then the A1 is triaged. And then you put it in again and it's scored at 40%. And then you put it in a fourth time and it scores at 21%. And like, you can see this kind of bouncing around. And I think the reason that has begun to happen so much in recent years is that reviewers at standing study sections used to be invited to serve 3 times a year for 4 years. So 12 consecutive sessions. And that is no longer the case. Now they are allowed to sit out 1 review per year. So they can serve 2 times a year for 6 years. So it's 12 non-consecutive sessions. That's an option. And what that it's great for the reviewers, it gives them a break. But what that means in terms of your application is that If you scored really well and resubmit really quickly, that's no guarantee that you're going to get the same reviewers. You may get a whole new crop of reviewers with a whole new crop of concerns, even at the same study section. So you can see things bouncing around in that way. And in fact, this very week, I had somebody, an applicant who was counseled by a former client of mine who I love and respect, who told her, don't bother submitting an A1 if you were triaged on the A0 because it won't get funded. And while I believe that that's probably true at this person's study section, it is definitely not true across all study sections. Okay, so the second part of your question is how many times can you submit the same idea? Ad nauseum. So you can write an A0, and if it's not funded, you can do a resubmission, which would include a one-page introduction to the revised application where you address the concerns of the reviewers, et cetera. If that's not funded, you can retool the idea and put it in as an A0 again, in which case it has no connection whatsoever to the previous submissions. It's going in as a new submission. It could be the same FOA and study section and institute, or you could change any of those. But you can keep doing this. And in fact, it is not uncommon for my new R01 applicants to get something funded on the third, fourth, fifth submission. It's the way that things are set up right now, it really favors applicants who are tenacious. More so than at any other time. I've been dealing with NIH since 1987 was when I laid eyes on my first NIH grant application. And it's more true now than ever that the system really favors people who are tenacious. Okay, we have a couple of more questions. So I didn't get a chance to email you this week. I'm wondering if you could, maybe not today, but just at some point, talk about administrative and diversity supplements. What is their purpose? Are there tips, tricks, or for how to successfully apply for one? Can you have more than one? How much support do you get with a supplement? Timelines on when to apply for one, how long they are. These are great questions, Wendy. And I think I'm going to bookmark that for a future discussion because it's 3:24 and there's a lot of information to cover there. So Jamie, if you could capture that question for me and email it to me and Becky, we will put something together and answer that in an upcoming session. But I want to get to the last question here and an emailed question that somebody sent me about a K99. How did proposals get assigned to a specific study section? Oftentimes it's not our first choice. Yeah, that is 100% true. So I always suggest to people that when you are applying to a funding opportunity announcement or a NOFO, notice of funding opportunity, that allows you to pick a study section. So in other words, it's not going to a special emphasis panel. It doesn't ask for a letter of intent, et cetera. It's going to one of the standing study sections. I suggest that you choose it using the CSR ART tool. I have done a mini tutorial on that in a past AGE section. And then you make that request in an assignment request form. However, there is no guarantee that you will get the study section that you requested. And in my experience, once you are assigned to a study section, I haven't seen a situation where somebody has successfully argued to get that assignment changed. If any of you know of a situation where that's the case, let me know. But I haven't seen that happen. So what happens is that an administrator at the Center for Scientific Review looks at the materials that you've uploaded and they run it through a program that will help them identify keywords in certain pieces of the application to line you up with a study section. And they may overrule your request and send you to a different one. And as I said, I haven't seen a successful case where somebody could change that assignment. But what you can do is on a resubmission, if you felt like you really went to the wrong study section, in the assignment request form, there is a text box that allows you to explain why you've made the choice that you've made, why you're asking for a specific study section. And in that text box, you can say, previously, my application went to XYZ study section. This is not the ideal fit. even though on the surface it may appear to be, it's not the ideal fit, and let me explain why. And you can say why, and why the one you're requesting is the better choice. Sometimes that is a successful strategy in getting you assigned to one that you feel is more appropriate, and sometimes not. There are no guarantees in any of this. So anyway, that's how that works. I hope that answers your question. Is the A1 typically assigned to the same set of reviewers? Yes, if possible, they do. SROs will make an effort typically to try to get the A1 assigned to the same set of reviewers if they're sitting on that particular session. Can the PI request otherwise, especially bias, unfairness? That's hard to do. So in this same assignment request form, there's a text box that allows you to talk about anyone on the study section panel, anybody in the roster who should be recused. But you have to give a really good reason. It can't be, I think they have a bias against my work. It could be like they're a direct competitor, so it compromises my confidentiality to have that person look at the application. It could be, they're at my organization or whatever it is. You have to give a reason in the assignment request form. And usually I think that person is biased is not usually a request that they're going to honor. So, but it is something that you can discuss with your PO or your SRO to see if you can come up with wording that will help you to make that request. In the last few minutes, I do want to answer a mail-in question that I got. So there was an applicant doing a K99R00. So this is a type of mentored award. It's a special category of mentored award. It's called a phased award. For those who don't know, a phased award is usually something that's separated by a dash, so K99-R00 or like UH2-UH3. And basically what that means is that the award is in two parts. And you get awarded the first part, and then you have to meet a set of milestones in order to be eligible to move on to the second part. In the case of the K99R00, which is sometimes affectionately referred to as the kangaroo because it looks like kangaroo, the K99 is a mentored portion and the R00 is the independent portion. And this person's question was, what activities can I propose for the K99 portion of it? So I went back and I dug up some kangaroos that I worked on in 2022. I did about half a dozen of them to see what kinds of activities people were proposing. And pretty much universally, people were proposing things like, there's usually some scientific component of it. So I'm going to beef up my knowledge about X, Y, and Z topic area by, sometimes they proposed a full semester-long course, but more often it was like a short course or a workshop or, training in the lab of somebody who's on my advisory committee to beef up my knowledge of some scientific content area or some technical skill set. So that's one category of things. Almost universally, people also proposed training in like soft skills. So training in grant writing, training in manuscript writing, running a lab, how to be a manager, how to manage a budget, things like that, how to be a mentor. And the types of activities people propose are kind of all over the place. They sometimes consist of workshops and seminars and short courses that are sponsored by their organization. Sometimes if you don't have a lot of resources like that at your organization, you might name some external to the organization. You could name the Early Career Reviewer Program at NIH as something that you plan to do. And then there are also like conferences and places where you're going to present, where you plan to present, lab meetings. Sometimes there are special types of topic related groups that might meet monthly on your campus, and you're going to attend those and present at those once a year. So it's a lot of that kind of thing and a lot of discussion of mentoring on the part of your advisory committee. So it's almost like you're taking like a KO1 or a KO8 or a K23 or one of those light, LITE, where like instead of saying, I'm going to take these 5 semester long courses, it's kind of like watered down and you're taking like short courses and workshops and that kind of thing, and working in the lab if you're a mentor, plus all the soft skills where you're going to do some kind of training to improve mentoring and grantsmanship and manuscript writing and lab management and that kind of thing. So for the person who asked that question, I think it was Michelle. I hope that answers your question. And I think I have answered every question that was in the live chat box. So, and we are out of time. So thank you all for attending. As always, I appreciate your support. We're getting a loyal group of people who seem to be showing up every week, and another batch of people who are watching these recordings on YouTube. So I really appreciate everybody's support. It's great for my professional development because you guys challenge me with these questions, and I actually really quite enjoy it. So, and next time around, I think we are having Dr. Becky Miro, I believe, is coming back as a guest. And I don't quite remember the topic. It might be an update on the new data management policy. I think that's the topic she's speaking on. It should be in your calendar and you'll get notices about it. And I'll answer that other person's question about administrative supplements at that time as well. So thank you all for attending, and I hope you have a wonderful day and good luck with your grant writing. Take care. Bye-bye.